So I foolishly committed to this talk without a subject back towards the end of last year. And some things happened that led me to choose this, move away from the UFO talks I did in the past. Next slide. So here's why I'm talking about conspiracy theory. You can't get away from it. It's in the news. December 14th, lone gunman shot up a school. It was a horrendous tragedy. Next page. But within days, somebody's out there claiming that it didn't happen, that they were actors, that the grieving families that were willing to go on television weren't real. I was horrified. Next. A next major tragedy in the United States. We have them all the time. And again, this April 15th. I don't think I need to explain to anybody what we're talking about here, the Boston bombing, right? Next page. So within 2 weeks, Boston hoax proven, fake blood, fake wounds, and more. So this is a typical narrative in our country, is that some big incident happens and somebody gets up and tells you that it's a FBI false flag operation. Next. So the Boston bombing, false flag operation, perpetrated on behalf of the Obama administration to sow fear in the populace. Sir.
Stupid question.
Yes.
What's a false flag?
That slide's actually... Okay, so what... Okay. It's going to go through the narrative and then fill in the blanks. Okay, fine. So a false flag operation is one in which a party perpetrates an act, generally a heinous one, in a way that leads you to believe that it was done by somebody else, and they do it for ulterior motives. The term false flag comes from back in the old wooden ship days when somebody would run a flag of another country or an enemy and then be able to work their way into the enemy's flotilla and do damage that way by sliding in unawares. So yes, the Boston bombing was a false flag operation. But why? Well, obviously, to promote a platform for the government to further erode Second Amendment rights and reduce civil liberties. But why? Because removing guns from the populace makes them vulnerable to that they can control and subject the masses. Next. But why? Well, it's because the leaders of the U.S. government are infiltrated by shape-shifting alien reptiles. I knew you were waiting to find out about that. And their mission is to take over the whole planet. So now you know. And just to give, this is obviously the Queen and President Obama, and you can see where their makeup's slipping. So is that the whole story? Next. So what is a conspiracy theory? So conspiracy theory is a theory that explains an event, set of circumstances, as a secret plot by a number of powerful conspirators. Really, the term theory, as we know from science, is an explanatory description for something that actually exists, and it's based on evidence. And that was generally true with conspiracy theory up until maybe the 1960s, where it picked up that whole paranoid crazies believe in conspiracy theory thing. Next. Let's see where I am. So here's one, a conspiracy theory. This one I kind of went into a little bit because it's persistent and it's interesting. So the original Protocols of the Elders of Zion was obviously done as an anti-Semitic plot. And the conspiracy theory is that, based on this hoax, that Jews are conspiring to take over the planet in various ways, to subvert governments and take over what we know as our civilization. Now, the original hoax was back from right around 1900, and it was written as a book, but the contents for that book were taken from an earlier work that was making fun of Napoleon III, I think. Yes, Napoleon III. And so it was taken from these dialogues. They were called the dialogues from hell between, between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. And so big portions of that where Machiavelli, who was supposed to be Napoleon III, and Montesquieu were debating things in hell, talked about Napoleon III's sort of grand schemes. Well, those grand schemes translate very well into blaming something on the Jews. And so large portions of that original work were copied into this thing called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And it was originally in Russian. It was very quickly translated into French. It became very popular in France. It spread to the United States. Henry Ford paid for 500,000 copies to be published in the 20s. Later, he backpedaled on that, but not until kind of the damage was done. Resurfaced again by Hitler, and it still pops up every so often. If you go and you look on the internet, now what they'll say is, yes, it was based on an earlier work, but that earlier work was actually describing this Zionist plot to take over the world. So yeah, the ball just keeps kicking down the road. But yeah, over a period of more than 100 years, this continues to pop up over and over again. So here's a number of sort of classic conspiracy theories that Roosevelt allowed the Pearl Harbor attack. They knew about it in advance, but because Roosevelt, even though he never said it in public, wanted to get into World War II, he went ahead and allowed the attack to happen. New World Order, that's that idea that there is some cabal, someplace that is trying to take over the world and enforce a new, totalitarian government that would control everything. And so everything that goes on, whether it's the Boston bombing or whether it's the Holocaust, is all trying to advance that cause of the New World Order. Kennedy assassination, I think we're all aware of that. Princess Diana had nothing to do with a driver that was probably drunk and shouldn't have been driving and pressured, and because of the paparazzi, it was really a plot by Buckingham Palace to kill Diana because she was becoming a liability and embarrassment. Everybody knows about the illegitimate presidency, right? You know, the birthers, Chester A. Arthur not being an American citizen, right? Chester A. Arthur, who grew up in Vermont, but his father moved around a great deal and had a brother who, at the time his father was living in Canada, his brother was born in Canada, and the claim is that it was not his brother, it was Chester A. Arthur was actually born in Canada. And even though it didn't last nearly as long as the Obama birther thing, that was the same thing, but earlier. The Rothschilds, a Jewish family that owns all of banking in the world, all of it. Holocaust denial, Christian apocalyptic prophecies, the end is nigh, always, and forever. It was 2,000 years ago, it still is. This came up this week, the tornadoes in Oklahoma. Within minutes, there was accusations on Twitter that the government was using the high altitude atmospheric research program, which is a bunch of satellite dishes up in Alaska that's jointly run with the government and University of Alaska and stuff. That's been going on for years, that's a weather control station. And pretty much within days of the tornadoes, they claimed that, again, that was a government conspiracy to cause that damage and sow, confusion and stuff like that. AIDS. That AIDS was created in cooperation with the CIA. And also there's everything. There's cures for cancer. Can I hold questions or is it?
Well, I was just wondering, how is Christian apocalyptic prophecy a conspiracy? I don't follow.
Oh, because there is a significant amount of belief in certain circles that people are actively trying to make the apocalypse happen. So things that go on in the government, things that are going on in society are trying to fulfill the prophecies to bring on the end times. So that's primarily where it is. Not that apocalyptic prophecies all by themselves aren't a conspiracy theory. AIDS, that there's a cure for cancer, that nobody wants you to know because the doctors and the drug companies make too much money having you be sick. So the idea that this is really fringe, and there's really nobody that believes this stuff. This is Alex Jones. Alex Jones was a Branch Davidian. He has, ever since the Waco incident, been very anti-government. And his perception that the government is kind of, well, you know, right. So, yeah, exactly. So he has been anti-government, and that is foundational to his understanding of the world. He started Infowars.com. He has a radio show. He's all over the internet and radio. In the last month, there have been articles about him in Slate, in the New York Times, in the LA Times. For somebody who thinks that he's fringe and nobody listens to him, you're wrong. He has 200, in January of 2012, he had 250 million downloads and listeners on his radio show. So there's people, he's got reach, definitely more than I do. So if you want to go and find out why the government did its latest act of evil, or how, that's a site to go to, Infowars.com. You won't run out of stuff to read. It'll go on forever. Next. So in my search, I went ahead and did just a Google search, and this site, which is really a Facebook page, came up. False flag, this is false flag ops don't work anymore. We are aware. And if you go there, you will find some extremely horrific things. You'll find some horrible images and some people saying really hateful things about, like this gentleman here who lost his legs. The claim, and you see a lot of red circled images on this page. In this case, they question the use of whether the tourniquet would work. Why isn't there blood pouring out of his legs? You can see arteries and stuff hanging out, but there just doesn't seem to be enough blood for these people. So they claim that it's fake, that he's an actor. There's another one where a lady, I forget her name, but she had her legs blown off, and she died. And they took a picture from the scene, and yes, you can see that one of her legs is still attached. How could she have had her legs blown off and his leg is still attached? And look at that leg. They did a terrible job with the makeup because it's completely misshapen, like there's no bones inside. Well, clearly, she had her leg destroyed. I mean, it was just, yeah. It's very hard to read. It's very hard to look at. But it's not that fringe. There's a lot of people out there who see and read this stuff. Next. A recent poll said that basically a third of people believe in aliens, and that 21% UFO crash at Roswell, government covered it up. Here's the New World Order, almost 30%. Still people think the moon landing was faked. Ghostbusters, not Ghostbusters, with Mythbusters wasting their time. Crack cocaine, fluoride, it's not there to help your teeth. It's various things, either to make you sick so you have cancer so that the doctors and the drug companies have business, or to make you susceptible to mind control. That's another possibility. And in this one, the government allowed 9/11 to happen. You know, the 9/11 truthers. Very common, very popular. And this is, again, I'm just trying to point out that there's a lot of people who believe this. This number, I think, translates to 66 million or something like that. So it's a lot of people. Next. This is another site, much cleaner. I have to give them credit. They have a very modern look, but no disinfo. And the best part about no disinfo, this is their purpose and goals. Our mission is to provide information that isn't twisted, to provide pure facts, to provide intelligent commentary on the facts, to never distort the facts. This is so people can make up their own minds without corruption. Another purpose is to unravel deception and disinformation so that a true understanding can be achieved. This is so people can compare the false information with real and uncompromised information. I had one of their articles that I was going to show you. I think I lost it in my massive research. But this is another true conspiracy theory. This is where the article about Boston being a complete hoax of actors and stuff like that. That's where the source of this was. Next. Okay, so, yeah, but why? I mean, yeah, people believe in this stuff, but why is it? And you know, as I said, a lot of people dismiss it, that it's a radical fringe. I'm not saying it's a major movement in this country, but it is real, and there's a significant number of people. So there's got to be something more going on than just these are the crazy people. There's got to be something else going on. Next. So it's interesting. As I'm reading about all this stuff, this kept coming into my mind, that their belief is that the people that perpetrate this are willing to sacrifice Americans, right? They think that the US government, the FBI, the CIA are willing to sacrifice individual people in the United States, or in the case of the bombings, or in the case of the shooting, multiple people, in order to advance the cause of the rest of us, maybe. And so I kept thinking about this, and it makes sense. It's a noble sentiment if you're the person with the choice, making the decision to sacrifice for the many. But if somebody decides that you sacrifice for the many, then it becomes kind of twisted. It was weird for me to think of that because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So one of the things that they found is that, in addition to many other things, that people who have a likelihood to conspire, project, and are willing to believe in conspiracy theories. That makes sense, I guess. You know, if you're willing to believe that you might do it, then it's a lot easier for you to believe that somebody else would do it. And also, Machiavellian, meaning you're very controlling, you're dispassionate, maybe have a bit of a psychopathy, that you don't feel compassion about your other humans, and so advancing your cause is more important. So these guys, Karen Douglas and Robbie Sutton at University of Kent, do a lot of research into conspiracy theory and what drives it. Next. So another study, this is really interesting. Conspiracy theory is not a fact-based belief system. So if my original narrative of the Boston bombing leading to reptile aliens trying to control the Earth, if you thought about that from the other way around, if your fundamental understanding is that there are shape-shifting reptile aliens trying to take over the Earth, and they are working through their agents in governments around the world, everything else kind of makes a little sense. I mean, when I projected, you thought it was silly, but if you believed, if you truly assumed, starting at the other end and looking for evidence, things would make a lot more sense to you. So people do that. And one thing that's really amazing to me is that they can handle incompatible beliefs at the same time, and it doesn't undermine their belief system. So very specifically, one of the things I asked people, say it's a group of 100 people, numbers aren't particularly important, but it's a group of 100 people, did you think that the US government was lying when they said that their special forces went in and killed Osama bin Laden, or was Osama bin Laden dead already? So 75% of the people, or whatever out of that group, would say yes. It was probably a smaller number, but let's, for the sake of argument, would say yes. Then they asked, in a different part of the poll so that wouldn't confuse them, is Osama bin Laden still alive? A significant portion of the same people said yes. It can't be both. However,
he's twin.
Both, that's right. I'm done, that's right. Kathy had it. But what happens is, in both cases, the person reading it saw this is indicative of a government conspiracy, it's a cover-up, and therefore, yes, I believe that that's possible. So it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have, so when you come at this and say, how is this possible? You would need, like let's say the moon hoax, you would need hundreds, thousands of people to be quiet about it, to keep the secret. That is freaking impossible, plus the money involved. Yeah, it really doesn't matter. And the other thing that comes out of this is people who believe in one conspiracy are very likely to believe in other conspiracy theories. So now, so we talked about like what kind of person. So why would anybody believe in these conspiracy theories? They're horrific. They're threatening. Well, the world is in a way horrific and threatening, and random things happen. And there's a huge amount of uncertainty if you can go to your local running event, biking event, if you go to the mall, and somebody with a bomb can blow it up, could take you out like that, and tomorrow is uncertain. And that's frightening to people. It's so frightening to people that they're willing to have a construct where these things happen for a reason. It's not a good reason, it's not a scrutable reason, but it happens for a reason, and that provides them some comfort. It's easier to believe that the government or somebody, some intelligent agent, is making actions happen on Earth, and it's not random. It's not something that can just happen for no good reason. And so this plays into climate change. Climate change is huge. It's big. It's daunting. It's very, very real. There is no doubt about that. There is no ambivalence. But everybody, including myself, who very much believes that it's real, are daunted by the task of trying to address it. How do you do something about it? How do you change your life? How do you, what could you do? And there are people who it's easier for them to believe that that whole thing about climate change is disinformation. That it is conspiracy by scientists, by government, by other governments and other countries' scientists. This is the biggest conspiracy that's ever happened in the world. There's so many people are in on it trying to dupe us. But it does make you feel better that you don't have to worry about climate change. It's going to be okay. Your kids are going to be all right, because it's not true. And there may be other good reasons to believe in conspiracy theories. Is there a good reason for people to be predisposed to believe in conspiracy theories other than, their feelings of uncertainty and scariness? Next. Yeah, because they happen. So Operation Himmler, this was in the run-up to World War II, and what the Nazis did was they created border skirmishes on the Polish border. They had concentration camp prisoners dressed as Poles so that they can go and perpetrate violence, leave the bodies behind, and people would then think that it was the Poles trying to cause trouble with Germany. They also had false radio broadcasts being sent into Poland that were supposed to be from Polish people, also fomenting unrest. So it was that is a classic false flag operation. Next, the Lavon affair. Mossad recruited Jews in Egypt to cause trouble in Egypt, to blow up some stuff. It's kind of weird because they were blowing up American and British things, and they wanted it to be blamed on the Muslim Brotherhood and cause trouble in Egypt. So there's another one the Mossad did. Next. In Iran, we sponsored Iranians to pose as communists to destabilize the existing democratically elected government so that we can put in the Shah, who is U.S. favorable. And not only that, but we were, that's right, and we were under a timetable because both Russia and the British were making inroads into having political control there. And yes, it worked out really well. Next. Okay, so conspiracy. So remember we talked about conspiracy theories, which are in some respect paranoid delusions, but they're based on people's real personal uncertainties. A conspiracy is basically the same thing, but it's real. Generally, they're not nearly as big as the conspiracy theories would have you believe, because real ones don't work very well. Big ones don't work very well.
I'll point out that people did eventually find out about all these things that you mentioned.
So far, yeah. That's a good point. And even with small groups of people, people found out. Next slide. Yeah, so the gunpowder plot, there was what, 8 or 10 people involved. It was not successful. Basically, it was Catholics. They were led by Catesby, but the famous one is Guy Fawkes, because Guy Fawkes was the one found with the gunpowder. And he had significant military experience, so they thought he would be the good man to make the explosion go. But somebody ratted them out, and they got caught. So it didn't happen. Next. So yeah, I mean, thought Picard was crazy, but he was right. Yeah, in case anybody doesn't know, this was, second season? And the Admiralty was infiltrated by these gross alien bugs that just swallowed, and they would take over your body. It's nasty. Lincoln assassination, 8 guys. The assassination was the only part that they basically got right, but the conspiracy had 2 other people, the vice president and the attorney general, that they were going to try and kill, but one guy chickened out, and the other guy screwed it up because he was met at the door by was it a butler or something that wasn't going to let him in, and kind of freaked him out, and he shoved his way through, and by the time he got to the attorney general, it was too late. There were too many people and stuff like that. And yes, they were caught, and this is how it ended up, other than for John Wilkes Booth, who ended up dying from a gunshot wound in the back. So, so another U.S. conspiracy, Iran-Contra. The idea is we were going to sell these missiles to the Iranians through the Israelis, take the money, and eventually the idea was to take the money and support the Contra rebels in Nicaragua. Again, this was relatively small. The number of people on the inside of this was very small. It wasn't a big group of people. There's, and I'll just, this is personal. This is completely personal. There's no way in hell Reagan didn't know about it. I'm just saying. But yeah, Oliver North took the fall for it because he was the architect of the plan. It was a very weird plan too. I mean, the idea was that we were going to sell those missiles, which are basically used for attacking tanks, to a moderate segment of the Iranian government in order to kind of break down that wall that we had with them and get some access into Iran. The Iranian government really played us. They were more than willing to take our weapons. They were more than willing to pay more than market price for them, which is what they did. And Israel was happy to take a cut. And they certainly were not going to give us any new access. They weren't actually moderate elements. They were mainstream parts of the government. And it's really, the more you read about this particular thing, the more embarrassing it is. When things were breaking down, they really thought they needed to get in there and try and get some of this access. They went over, and it was, not Ashcroft. Crap, I'm trying to remember who it was. But he brought a Bible with him that had a little note in it signed by Reagan. Sent a Bible? It just shows how little they understood. Unbelievable. Next. This was one of the most nefarious conspiracies that I've ever seen. It's a false flag. There's all kinds of manipulation going on. It's unbelievable. It's a thing of beauty, really. But yeah, you can see where people, are uncertain about conspiracy theories because there's been a lot of stuff going on. Next. Okay, so this is my summary. Conspiracies are real. World's a scary, random, and confusing place. And the universe is out to kill you. By the way, these shirts are available at the Astronomy Cast booth over by the escalator. But that being the case, it doesn't justify just making stuff up. The universe has no obligation to comport to your fantasies. So you can make stuff up. It doesn't change the world. Next. And yeah, in case you thought I forgot. So there's this guy, David Icke. David Icke was a soccer player. He was like a sportscaster, journalist. He had a vision and made up all kinds of crazy stuff. Apparently he was the voice of God, but I don't know what God and reptile aliens have to do with each other. He's written like 5 books. He has a big following. It's Icke, I-C-K-E. It's worth looking it up because it's entertainment. But yes, this is his description. They're from Alpha Draconis, and they are here to take over the world. So be afraid, be very afraid. Yes, and if you wear these special, I have a pair here. If you wear special sunglasses, you can see them. That's right. Okay, so any questions?
Just to give folks some idea of how far these things can get, one of the big conspiracy theories going on now is about the U.S. government buying ammunition in such mass quantities as to deplenish the supply. And this got so far that they had some Tea Party folks actually propose bills in the House of Representatives.
Well, and see that there was a section that I had to cut out because I didn't have enough time, but there are things that people think are conspiracy, there are conspiracy theories about things that really are almost like conspiracies themselves. The reality is, the reason there's a run on gun ammunition is because there is this conspiracy theory going out that the government is trying to take all your guns away. So Americans are stocking up on guns, they're stocking up on ammunition, and they're creating this situation where it looks like all the ammunition is gone. And actually it is. It's hard to get ammunition. But it's not because of the government. And in fact, the part that's really annoying about that is that those liberties that they are concerned about protecting at their front door with a gun, they gave up in the voting booth. So it's ridiculous. But yeah, thank you. Bob?
Some people believe that Alex Jones doesn't really believe everything he says. He's doing it for money. And some people also believe that a large part of his audience is listening not because they believe, it's for entertainment. Right. Yeah. Now, what I just said may be a conspiracy.
You know, I really wanted to believe that too about Alex Jones. And then when I started reading about him and his history and how far back it goes and how long he's been doing this, he did a long time when there was no money involved and stuff. And it just, I mean, maybe now he does it for money, but when he started, he clearly didn't. And he had a very, again, because of Waco and the Branch Davidian cult, he had a very anti-government bias, and it became stronger and stronger over time. So,
could that be just like a faith healer, though? That started out.
Could be.
Didn't have a lot of followers.
Yeah, I mean, you can't look into somebody and know whether they're making stuff up. You know, well, I mean, I'm sorry, they're making stuff up, but you can't tell whether they believe what they're selling. Yeah, that's always true. Thanks.
My single favorite conspiracy theory is when they did a study on conspiracy theorists. They actually studied the conspiracy theorists, and then they put out their paper, and the conspiracy theorists attacked them as that being a conspiracy because they believed that they had hired liberal professors and stuff to come in to take these tests and fake the test results. So the conspiracy theorists bought into the study on conspiracy theorists to be a conspiracy about conspiracy theorists.
You know what? It makes a certain kind of sense. But yeah, that was the paper that I talked about earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Laura?
So do you consider someone saying that the world is going to end on March 21st or something like that to be a conspiracy in order to get money out of people, or conspiracy theory for all of the people that believe that it's going to happen on X, Y, or Z?
I think it, just like the religion question, it kind of has to go back to why are they saying it, or why is it that they think that it's true, right? I mean, the Mayans didn't, create their calendar in order to take over the world or to destroy the world or anything like that. So, there are definitely people who take information like that and use it to manipulate other people. But is that a conspiracy theory, or just general nuttiness? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Ellie?
We're getting a lot of yucks here, and it's great, and also learning a lot. I'm not criticizing, but I think I think we're forgetting the harm this inflicts. This is a very serious problem, not only on a national scale or a global scale, but on a personal scale. Think of the pain inflicted on the families in Newtown who were accused of being actors, who were told that they did not lose children. One of them, and this is my favorite bit of reasoning in all time, was they had a family picture that they were showing, and then a different picture of the child who died, and two different children were wearing the same dress. Apparently, there are a lot of people who never wore hand-me-downs. So they said the fact that it was the same.
That was the dad and the daughter that I had in the picture. Yeah. That's right. Well, and there's a great story. I know that you had also read the psychopathy test. And a lady who was in the 7/7 bombing in the subway in Britain went to, they basically had their own version of the truthers, and she went to a meeting to see, well, these people obviously had never met anybody who was on the train, who was part of the bombing. And she went to one of their meetings and was vilified and chased out of there in tears because they said that she was there for the government, that she was part of the conspiracy, that she wasn't a victim, that, and again, it was a very personal thing for her. Yeah. And they've continued to on the internet and phone and whatever, death threats and everything. Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. It's tried to keep it light a little bit, but understood.
I was going to say on the subject of the end of the world cults that I remember reading about the head of one in, I think, South Korea, who actually was successfully prosecuted for fraud because a bunch of people had sold everything they had to donate money to him as the head of the end of the world cult, and they caught him because he had some investments that didn't vest until after his predicted end of the world.
Just another example of some of the real harm these things can do is there are a lot of kids dying right now because their parents bought into this whole vaccine conspiracy theory.
And it's not even the kids who don't get the vaccine, it's because then they're carriers to other kids.
Joan Assault was on our side, I got to say that.
John?
With reference to the harms and what you were talking about, the penetration of this with regards to AIDS, I will say that every single HIV patient that I've taken care of who is from Africa knows about the conspiracy theory that HIV is harmless, but the medications actually cause AIDS as a conspiracy by American drug manufacturers. It's to the point where for some people it's a barrier of care and you can't actually take care of them because they don't want to even engage with anything that you're saying, let alone make the right choices with regards to their health. And it's a very big problem because we actually have a growing segment of immigrants from those areas of Africa in Baltimore. And so that's a really fascinating thing I'm running into more and more in my daily practice.
I wanted to point out that it doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory for the person to hold the contradictory beliefs. I've had a physicist tell me, you've presented me with facts that contradict my position, but it doesn't change my opinion. Because they're storing facts and beliefs in different places in the brain, and a contradictory fact will not change a belief.
Was this a fact having to do with physics? Was this a fact having to do with physics?
I think it had to do with computing.
Okay.
It wasn't even. He acknowledged that they were facts, right, and that they contradicted his position, but he said, "Doesn't change my opinion."
Well, yeah. I mean that. There's a very common example of that is on the tip of my tongue, and it's broad-based and happens a lot, and it's been going on for thousands of years in the world, and just can't get it. Next question, right here.
And I think part of it might be that a lot of these people take these things that they believe as fact, like they have facts to back it up. I mean, it's kind of fascinating when you go through it. It's like, wow, this guy's got a lot of math. And it's all math that makes no sense, but he's got math. But if you're dealing with people who are not completely on the insanity level, you're dealing with, your relatives or, people who otherwise are normally sane people. Not that I have, not that
Well, and it depends. It depends on what your critical thinking skills are too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I will not be outing any of my family here. But the question is like since it isn't a fact-based thing, other than just kind of ignoring them and like leaving the room or, stuffing your mouth so you don't have to respond to the questions, like how do you try to convince people?
Well, the difficulty is it is a fact-based thing from their perspective, right? I mean, you go to that Facebook page, and there's lots of pictures of people who are part of exercises having to do with war and stuff and violence and disaster, and they've got really real-looking wounds that look very similar to the people who are actually victims of a bombing. There were another fact from the Boston bombing is that there were police out there with bomb-sniffing dogs prior to the event. Well, yeah, exactly. It's a large collection of people, and for security, you would do that. No, clearly they were doing that because they knew that those bombs were going to go off. But again, they have their set of facts. They may or may not be reasonable. The only thing I would say to do is just, challenge them on how does that make sense? How could that be? So you mean that every pediatrician in the country is in on, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, people have devoted their lives to the health and well-being of children, are in on this whole vaccine conspiracy to keep kids sick? What? Or to have them, get autism or whatever? How does that even make sense? So it's the only approach that I can think of that might work. Another fresh voice. Right. And he lost his credentials and it was a laughingstock, yeah. And yet he still gets speaking engagements and stuff. Yeah. Right.
It was published, so it must be true.
Last question. Sorry.
Going back to protocols of Elders of Zion, is the idea of the blood libel one of the oldest conspiracy theories? That Jews are killing Christian babies to use their blood for their Passover. Is that one of the older?
Oh, clearly one of the older ones. The question is it because there are still people who believe it, I might go with that. I'm sure that in ancient Egypt there were conspiracy theories. I have no doubt that in Greece and going back to the Sumerians, they had conspiracy theories. I don't know what they are, and they certainly aren't in existence now. So maybe that could be certainly one of the oldest ones. And yeah, it still gets brought up, and it's still believed by a significant number of people. Yeah, absolutely.
I work in a Jewish hospital. They won't let me in the cafeteria. That's all.
Well, thanks everyone. You guys have been a great audience. I appreciate it. Thank you.